Welcome to this guide to the WCW Galoob figures. Be honest, do you actually like these figures? I'm not sure I do. I didn't when I was a kid, and I'm not sure I do now. I'm glad I've got them as part of the collection for nostalgia purposes. I haven't got them all, I have to say, but let's take a look at what we've got, because they're quite fun, I suppose. The other thing to say is most of mine are not in great condition. There is an orange Sting. I had one of those as a kid, but I gave it to a friend. He was desperate for one of my Hasbros. He wanted me to swap one with him. And I sort of acquiesced and swapped this Sting instead, because I didn't want to get rid of any of my Hasbros. I think he was after Greg Valentine, of all the figures he wanted. He's got his little ponytail there. And this one, as you can see, is in absolutely terrible condition. So the ones I had as a kid, I got rid of. And then after the WWE Retros came out, I sort of got the bug again. There's Ric Flair, looking for all the world like a young Triple H. I got the bug again and bought a job lot of Galoobs on eBay, including the ring, because my original ring I had as a kid shot to pieces. I didn't have many figures, Galoob figures, as a kid, because I had to make a choice. I was a WWF fan and a Hasbro collector, and these things were just sort of extra money, really, and you had to decide what you spent your pocket money on. There's Arn Anderson. Now, none of my Arns have got bald spots. I think I did have one when I was a kid that had a bald spot. But as you may know, there are various variations when it comes to Galoobs, including the UK exclusives. I've got some of those, but not all of them. This is the standard version of Brian Pillman, missing fingers and all on my one with his tiger pants. And there's a blue one of those, which is a UK exclusive, which I haven't got. There's the blue Sting, which matches his giant version at the back. Nice face paint and scorpion detail. My favourite of all these figures, I think, is this version of Sting. It's only a repaint, really, isn't it? It's got the same face paint, but I just like it. I like the detail on there. It's so 90s. Little ponytail. I've always liked his black and yellow. It's good, that one. Lex Luger, who, that era, I mean, if you can tell that's Lex Luger, you sort of can, can't you? Was just very boring. Lex Luger in the early 90s was dull. Not in all of his career, you know, late 90s, during the Nitro phase, he was great, but yeah, I think the figure reflects that. It's just a really boring figure. And the fact they didn't move, the fact there was no articulation, as a kid, they paled in comparison to the WWF Hasbros, which were all bright and shiny and did things. There's Barry Windham, who looks a bit like Shane Douglas to me, during his ponytail days. He's got his cowboy boots on at least. And as I said to you before, these for me are just to have as part of my collection. They're not in great nick, they're not in great condition. I'm not one of those collectors, mainly because I could get them cheap, to be honest. Rick Steiner's quite a fun figure. He's got his tattoo and his headgear. And that, I don't know if you can tell, is supposed to be Scott Steiner. There's his mullet at least. And the playability wasn't really there as a kid. You know, the Hasbros always seemed to me much more fun because they did stuff. These always just seemed like big lumps of brick that you threw at each other. That's Sid, again, like his big counterpart there. He's got Sid's socks on. Not a great facial likeness, but at least he's got a mullet. They've got some great 90s hair, all of these figures. I talked earlier about variants. That's Ron Simmons, one half of Doom. Sweatpants Doom, which has always slightly baffled me, I'll be honest. And this one's in really bad condition, but I wanted it and I didn't want to spend much money on it. I just wanted to have them in the collection, really. Somebody somewhere has taken a marker pen to Butch Reed. But that is the one good thing about the Galoobs. There are certain curios, I suppose. There are people like Butch Reed who haven't really got many other figures. And also, you may see my version's got the Nike swoosh on it, which then disappeared, I think, in subsequent versions of the figure. Speaking of people who don't appear in too many lines, Tom Zenk. If I'd asked you to pick that out of the lineup, could you have told me that was Tom Zenk if you didn't know? Probably need to clean these up, and that's one thing I could do. You can probably tell I don't tend to get these out very much or do much with them. I just wanted them just to take a few photos with the retros and with my Hasbros. Now, these are, for the most part, UK exclusives. As I said, I haven't got them all. There's one or two big ones like the Dustin Rhodes and the Big Josh figure, which are relatively expensive on eBay, that I haven't got. They're mostly just repaints. Pink Sid. It's funny when there's a Mattel figure like this that's come out quite recently. Well, there's the original Galoob version. They are like bricks. You could really do someone some damage if you threw that at someone. I wouldn't advise it. I'm sure that happened in somebody's bedroom, playing with friends. Did you play with your figures with friends? It was never very easy to play together, was it? Now this I bought, again, I wanted a cheap version. I should probably upgrade this figure. I got it really cheap. Because it's a UK exclusive, it's always a bit more expensive online. It's got no nose. I could probably update that one. I think I might treat myself to an updated UK exclusive Lex Luger. Ric Flair on the end of a lightning bolt. That was Dusty, wasn't it? There he is. Someone's flattened his nose, poor lad. Hey! Happy-go-lucky El Gigante. Never seen him look so happy. It's terrible gear, isn't it? I mean, you thought that at the time. But in figure form, it really brings home just how terrible his wrestling gear is. There he is. Maybe he's playing basketball. I don't know. It's good for a sort of lifting choke, that figure. It's quite a fun figure to have. I'll show you how it compares to the others. I'll put it next to... Oh, I spoiled the surprise of that Rick Steiner, but there we are. Look, it's pretty good, isn't it? In fact, it might be a slightly ridiculous scale, if you think about it. Not sure. And there is the other Rick and Scott. I always think they look like a Chewit, like a packet of sweets, these two, which I suppose is in keeping with their outfits. They always were very day glow. Sort of the Steiners in a packet of Skittles. It's very 90s. And he's got his tattoo again. Quite like that pair. They're decent. His Arn, straight red pants, solid beard. No bald spot again. I mean, that's just it's where it's rubbed off on that one. I could invest, I suppose, and buy a whole new set, but I don't really want to spend money on figures anymore, as I've sold my collection. So the idea was to buy a sort of cheap knockoff set just to have for fun and for photographs. And the Freebirds. Now, I had a set of these when I was a kid, got rid of them, bought these cheap. Somebody somewhere has painted on, I think it looks quite good. He's used a pen and painted on these little armbands. The further down the street, the badder it got. Well, there you go. They're quite fun, aren't they? Those two. Let's take a look at the ring, shall we? Now, my original one of these rings I got from Argos here in the UK when it was reduced for Christmas. I got it for about £5, I think it was. And I got it so that I could take the cage off and put it onto my Hasbro ring. All of these, the one great thing about these figures, I suppose I should say, is they all came with a belt. So when you had the WWF title that you got with the Hasbros, it was quite good. These were quite a good addition if you wanted tag team titles or an IC title. Pretty basic, but you know, you'd take anything back in those days. There's the hammer. It came with the bell. Haven't got the sound box. That was a different release. Now the one I had that I smashed to bits because although it is a solid ring, it's a real sort of hard wearing thing. The ropes are really soft, and so are the corner pads. I'll show you that in a minute. That's not really working, is it? But there you go. That's the general idea of it. Yeah, the corner pads were quite solid and they don't have a lot of give. So if you throw anything into them, honestly, what happens is after some time they just sort of break apart. And the ropes don't really bend; they just stretch and don't go back to their own shape. So mine just absolutely fell apart. I threw it in the bin eventually. Should we launch somebody? See if we can get people to stand up. One of the reasons they weren't all stood up to show to start this video is that I couldn't get them to stand up when I gave up. Right, let's see if we can do this. It's like a 90s television advert. Ready for this? A man called Sting. Oh dear, that looked like a painful bump, didn't it? The cage was cool, to be honest. You know, it's funny, isn't it? Hasbro's, as great as they were, you know, there were no managers, no referees, there were not a lot of accessories. You consider what's been the staple of most other lines, even the LJNs before them. So actually to get belts and a cage was a selling point of these figures. But yeah, look, those ropes, they just... I think one of these, if I remember rightly, oh, there we go. Funny what comes back to you, isn't it? Let's try the launching pad in the corner, shall we? Ready? Okay, ready, here we go. Well, that didn't look, that hurt, didn't it? And then there's one more over here. Let's try somebody else. I'd say let's try Flying Brian, but I'm not sure he's going to stand up. Let's see if he'll dive over the ropes. Sid's taking a pasting, isn't he, here? I think Sting's been stretchered out. Ready? Whoa! He went up there. He's got his hand caught in the ropes. At least he flew, that one. Those are the Galoobs that I've got. They are a fun set, but they're also a bit rubbish. Incidentally, there's another guide to the big figures if you want to see that. Take a look at my other videos.